Now, back by popular demand, it's the Lance Roberts Show.
And welcome this morning at 6:06 on this Friday Eve edition of the Lance Roberts Show. Of course, that's right. It's Thursday. Sliding into the end of the week here. So, big story, of course, yesterday was the meeting with the Federal Reserve. And, of course, I know a lot of people don't pay attention to it. They're like, it's the Fed. It's boring. It's economics. I get it. But if you like your job, you might want to pay attention to what they're saying. And we're going to have a good bit of conversation on that today. We've got Danny Ratliff, Certified Financial Planner, joining us here in a little bit. Also, Michael Leibowitz joining us at 6:30. He's our resident Federal Reserve expert, and so we'll be talking a little bit about what the Fed actually said at their meeting yesterday. But we also have an article out this morning on that meeting on our website at realinvestmentadvice.com. And if you go there, you can download the article talking about what happened at the meeting yesterday and why it's actually very important for a lot of things. One, if you're on the political front and you are concerned about debts and deficits, well, what the Federal Reserve said yesterday in relation to where things are headed and what their projections are, has a lot to do with potentially about where the size of the debt and the deficit are going to be much sooner rather than later. And, of course, that is an issue. Now, if you're an investor and you've got stocks in the market or you've got a 401k plan that you're trying to save up for retirement on, you might want to pay attention to what they said yesterday, because what they said particularly isn't good for the stock market. Now, in the short term, people have misinterpreted, and we're going to talk about this some today, but in the short term, yesterday and of course, this morning, investors are still misinterpreting what the Fed actually said. In a lot of ways, this is akin to somebody offering you, we actually talked about it yesterday, right? A little bit about talking about baseball food, new baseball food that's coming out. And, of course, what the Fed said yesterday on the outside looks like a sugar-coated, that powdered sugar dipped, like like on the top of a sugar-coated donut, that nice white powder sugar.
Oh yeah,
yeah, that's good stuff, right? On the outside, that's what the Fed said. On the inside is barbecue brisket. I didn't get that one yesterday. I'm sitting looking at something that looks like dessert, and I bite into it, and it's sugar-coated brisket. I'm sure it's probably great, but
I think for the purposes of your illustration,
yeah,
probably on the inside it's going to be hamburger meat.
Could be. I mean, just something and our Brussels sprouts.
Probably 65% lean hamburger meat.
Or Brussels sprouts, sugar-coated Brussels sprouts. Because that's the thing now. Have you noticed that everywhere you go, somebody's serving some form of Brussels sprout that's, they're honey glazed or they're this glazed or
it's
something.
A great PR campaign for Brussels.
I tell you what, whoever came up with it is a genius, because Brussels sprouts have been the most ignored food, I think, for the last 50 years.
And asparagus.
And asparagus.
Don't disparage asparagus.
I know, right? But anyway, so this was kind of the idea yesterday that I don't know if those were good analogies or not. You get the point. On the outside, it's one thing. On the inside, it's something else. That's the point here. Come on, play with me. It's Thursday. It's been a long week. All right, we're going to talk about some more about that today. Other stories out in the news today. We're doing a lot of work with private space companies now to send rockets up into space.
Oh yeah.
And I just look. There's a couple of things I just don't understand in this world that we live in today. But there's a whole science behind launching rockets into space. I have a friend of mine. They have a company here in Houston down by NASA. They're all a bunch of ex-NASA engineers, and they actually created this very interesting product where they can launch a package into space, and because of the gravitational waves, I don't understand all the science behind it, but because of the gravitational waves in space, they can launch it to a specific point in space and let this package go, and it will drift to the space station.
Really?
And yeah, and then there's what they call the Japanese. There's a Japanese airlock, which is the only airlock that has this mechanical arm on it, and they can open this airlock, reach out with this arm, grab this. It looks like a backpack, and they grab this backpack, pull it in, and it contains experiments or whatever it's in there,
Food,
whatever it is, and then they basically throw it back out into space, and the thing launches, sprouts wings and flies back to Earth and lands on a base in California.
Yeah.
So it's phenomenal technology. But here's the point about all this: is that in order for all this to work, they have to understand the rotation of the Earth, right?
I know where you're going.
You know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
All right. So there is a rotation of the Earth and these gravitational waves that surround the Earth. And that's the way this whole thing works. So this all thing revolves around at what point in space do you launch this thing based on the rotation of the Earth, these gravitational waves, and how it actually orbits around the Earth to its destination. Okay. So if that is science, if that is actually science, and you're sitting there in the car right now going, yeah, that makes complete sense. I mean, if I shoot something up in space, and if it stays, and look, and here's the other thing, right? We've talked about launching things into space where you'll go straight up into space for basically travel, right? I want to go from the U.S., I want to go from Washington, D.C. to Paris. Launch a rocket straight up into space. It basically doesn't go anywhere. It just reaches outside the gravitational force of the Earth. The Earth spins around underneath you, then you come back down into Paris in like an hour. Right? So super fast travel, because the Earth travels at something like 13,000 miles an hour when it pivots, right? So that in and of itself says, okay, the Earth is round and we orbit. Now, you're probably sitting in the car right now, it's like, well, duh, Lance, everybody knows the Earth is round. Well, if everybody knows the Earth is round, why is there a bunch of flat Earth advocates trying to make waves about going to Antarctica to determine that the Earth is actually flat?
They're living on the edge.
Look, there's two fallacies in life right now that you need to understand that are false narratives. One, the Earth is not flat. And two, you cannot cure a debt problem with more debt. If you believe those two facts, you're in good shape to start your Thursday. We got more of the Lance Roberts Show coming up after the break. Don't go away.
Lance Roberts blog. It's required reading for the informed investor. Catch it today on LanceRobertsShow.com.